Hey guys, welcome to Poor Man Mods. Moral of today's story is don't get friends. They're expensive. So, a little bit of update on this car and future plans. Really, I guess in the past year, you haven't seen a whole lot of this car on the channel. I tend to get into projects that I think aren't going to be big or worthy of a video and end up not filming it, and then it turns into a snowball effect, or a bunch of little things, and then it's worthy of a video, and I kick myself in the ass for not filming it when I should have. So I'm going to try to recap everything that's happened to this car about over the past year, and the predicament that I'm in right now and the future plans for it. So I think the last time a video of this car has really been on the channel was the electronic parking brake install, or the line lock that I did, but only like 3 people saw it. Before that was a pretty low quality dyno video of this car. And really, I guess it hasn't really been on the channel much since I did like the wheels and wide body that I can remember. So over the past year, this car did have some issues. The Haltech ECU did fail on it. The internal map sensor failed. And in the process of troubleshooting that, I thought it was a fuel injector problem, and upgraded to a radium fuel rail with ID 1050 cc injectors. So big fuel system got put in this thing, and got the Haltech ECU fixed once we figured out that the internal map sensor failed. I sent it out to Haltech, and they promptly fixed it for me. So no problem there, and took the car down to JE Import Performance after I got the ECU back, and with the bigger injectors, had the tune cleaned up a little bit and put on the dyno, and it made 505 wheel horsepower. Super happy about that number for pretty much a stock 1J. It's an untouched 1J except for cams, stock head bolts, stock head gaskets, so probably shouldn't push it too much harder. In addition to that, there's also been just tiny things here and there that I've done, just little things that I can't even remember what they were. Not important stuff, but other than, the dyno and the fuel system and the ECU, I didn't do a ton to the car really in 2022 up until very late 2022, because I have been convinced by 98% of me has been convinced by Faye over at Pistons and Pixie Dust to take this car to the next Supras in Vegas event, which I guess is September or October of 2023. And she got me like 98% convinced. And then I was talking to my friend Tony about it, and he pushed me over the edge and got me that extra 2% convinced. So now, because of those two, I am now preparing this car for a 5,000 mile road trip. And if you guys have been subscribed to the channel for any amount of time, you know how unreliable this car is. Traditionally, I can't trust it to leave my house to go to the gas station, even though I've been fixing it for 10 years, and one thing breaks and then I fix it, and another thing breaks, and I guess I've got to get to the point at some time to where I've fixed everything that could possibly break and everything has been fixed. I mean, I've had this car since 2012. I've put 10,000 miles on it in those 10 and a half years. So mileage-wise, everything that I've done is still new on this car. So I have been convinced to take this thing to Supras in Vegas and back, and that is, for me, 5,000 miles round trip. And I was basically convinced, I guess, around November 2022. So then I started making a list of everything that I can think of to either at least look at or address to make this thing reliable enough, or at least make me trust it enough to attempt the 5,000 mile road trip. And now where it gets even more expensive. So Tony and Faye convinced me to do this road trip, which in and itself is expensive. Just getting the car ready and the fuel and all that stuff. But then Brad is going to be going with me. He's going to be my co-driver in this car. And he's been diving into my pockets too. So he's made some suggestions and complaints about the car. And so I'm trying to satisfy him, because he's going to be in this car for 72 hours of driving. And yeah, so these friends are diving into my pockets. And so I'll go over to the car and show you what I've done. But recently, because of Brad, I gave him a nice new seat. He complained about the passenger seat in this car. It was some knockoff racing seat, and I put a nice Corbeau in there. He was complaining about the ride height, and the bottom of that seat was really thick, and the bracket design lifted it up, so his head was really high up. So we got a Corbeau seat for it, and we revised the bracket for the seat and lowered it. And I really wish I would have filmed it, but I made a seat bracket for this seat using the factory seat bracket from the factory seat. I didn't buy a bracket. So if you're looking to save a little bit of money, but spend a little bit of time doing it, one way that you can make a bracket for these cars, if you want to throw away the stock Supra seats, cut the feet off of that seat or the bracket, however much you can cut off and keep, bolt that. What I did, I cut the 4 feet off of the seat, bolted it in the car in their original locations, and then I took some C-channel stock and welded a square and connected it, and that basically made a seat bracket. Then you can basically attach that bracket that you made to your aftermarket racing seat, and it'll bolt into the factory location. Now, I don't have sliders on this, and that's how I was able to drop it a whole bunch, but that's how you can get away without buying a seat bracket. If you have the factory seat, cut the 4 feet off, bolt it in place, weld it together, whether it's a square or, however you decide to do it, weld them together so you can remove it and put it in, and then find a way to attach that bracket that you just made to your racing seat, and that way you don't have to spend 120, 150 bucks on an aftermarket bracket. Another thing I recently did to this car, which you may have seen if you followed me on Instagram, I would love to daily drive this car, but really the only thing that makes it not dailyable is how loud it is. So I modified the downpipe, made a new downpipe, and put a bigger muffler in it to quiet it down, and now it's a lot more manageable. I might not be finished modifying the exhaust though, but I put the muffler in the downpipe to maximize ground clearance because there is no room underneath this car. So it was a game of millimeters, but I got this big-ass vibrant muffler to fit, and I think the end result is worth it. So it should save our ears over the 5,000 miles. Another thing I did was get rid of the D&D Performance Interior steering wheel. I sold that to my friend Nick, and I got a Grip Royal steering wheel and did the Energy Short Quick Release. But check this out. I put a Energy Short Quick Release on there, the red piece, and it does not work with the Energy Short Hub, which is the black piece right here. Their two pieces aren't designed to work together. All it needs is a spacer. So my liberal arts degree just engineered a little spacer here and 3D printed it and got it to work. So now I have their short hub, short quick release, with a Grip Royal wheel, and the position of it is absolutely perfect for me, and I freaking love it. Feels good, and it looks good. And there is my Poor Man Mods 3D printed dual cup holder, since I kind of removed my center console. And so I 3D printed a solution for it, and now it holds 2 big-ass cans. And yes, I am fully aware that these seats don't match. Maybe one day I'll get a matching Corbeau, but I actually love this seat. It might not look the best, but I find it incredibly comfortable, even for how cheap it is. I'm actually very fond of this seat, so I really don't want to get rid of it unless I have to. So I'll have unmatched seats for the time being. No big deal. Back in 2018, when I was down in Haltech, getting the ECU installed in this car and everything, they told me to run to the store and grab some battery cable. I think they told me 4 gauge or 2 gauge, because they wanted me to run a dedicated ground from the battery in the trunk to the engine block, because they said the ground wire was a really common problem with people just having tuning problems. So they wanted a good dedicated ground, and I went and got this bad boy. And I came back and they were like, why the heck did you grab a garden hose? That thing is so big. And I was like, I don't know. I grabbed 2 gauge. I thought that's what you told me to grab. So I grabbed this 2 gauge wire. And they kind of made fun of me for it because it was so big. And Brad has hated it the entire time. And he demanded that I put a smaller ground cable in because he's diving into my pockets now. So I installed a smaller, more attractive ground cable for that. And now he's unhappy with the head unit, and he wants me to put like a nice fancy Android head unit in this thing, I guess for the 72 hours that we're going to be stuck in it. So, I'm trying to get this thing ready for Supras in Vegas, and I'm going to try to film as much as I can that I think will be interesting. And I do have quite a lot of planned for it. I want to repaint the roof. I want to pretty much redo the fuel lines, or at least inspect them. I did buy a new fuel pump bracket for the fuel tank, so I can replace those lines on top of the tank because they're looking not so good. Maybe I'll re-brake line the whole car. But basically, I'm going to go over it with a fine-tooth comb and find things that might be a problem in the next 5,000 miles. Maybe I'll do wheel bearings. I'm not sure. I'm definitely doing brakes. I got to do oil, obviously, before and after. Maybe in the middle of the road trip. I would like to redo my intercooler piping. Maybe upgrade or replace my upper control arms to have the ball joints in them, because you can't just do the ball joints. So I don't know, maybe I'll do fancy control arms or something. And maybe I'll do aftermarket suspension. So I had this issue with Coney. I wanted to stiffen up the rear of the suspension a little bit, and you may have seen my post on Instagram where I was really excited, and I bought a set of rear Coney shocks for this car because I wanted to stiffen it up a little bit. And for the past 8 or 9 years, I've had like red, no-name, high-performance shocks in the rear that were 30% stiffer than stock, and I just wasn't happy with how soft they were. So I bought a set of Coney rears that quoted to be adjustable, and man, what a pile of garbage those things were. I'm sorry, Coney, but I'm like really upset about this whole process. So here's a little PSA. Do not buy Coney rear shocks for your Mark III Supra if you're looking for an easy bolt-in rear shock. 3 problems with those Coney yellows. I'm sure if you're familiar with Coneys, you know that they are adjustable with a knob at the top. Granted, I bought these Coney shocks from a listing on eBay. I did not buy them from the Coney website, so that listing did leave out some information. But of course, you know, for the Supra, they just had to be different. So here's what I encountered with the Coney yellows. For one, they claim to be adjustable, but they're really not. You can adjust the valving for it before you put it in the car, but then it's pretty much done. So to adjust them, there's no knob on the top. To adjust the Coney yellows for the Mark III Supra rear shock, you have to take the spring off of the shock, put the piston in a vise, then take the shock body and compress it the whole way in, and then you can rotate the shock body one way or another to make it softer or stiffer. Not really adjustable once it's in the car. I'm not going to take the whole rear suspension apart to adjust it. Even when I made it full stiff, those Coney yellows were softer than those cheap red high-performance shocks that were like $40 a piece. So these $150 shocks, however much they were still softer than the cheap no-name shocks that I had. To top it off, they don't come with a spring perch. On the website, it says it uses the OEM spring perch. Well, these cars are 30, 35 years old now. The factory shocks should probably have been replaced 15 years ago. Now, some people say the OEM perch just slides off the OEM shock. That's fine, but who has them anymore? These cars are so old now, the shocks have been replaced once or twice or 3 times. And every other aftermarket shock comes with the perch. So I emailed Coney and I said, well, what do I do if my shock is really rusted out? What do you suggest I do? They said, oh, just go on the forums or marketplace and find one. And I said, well, why doesn't Coney just do that and make one? And they said, well, you know, we don't really sell enough to invest the money into making a perch. So rather than going to another manufacturer and buying their perches and installing it on the Coney shock, or spending the money for the R&D to make their own perch, they just decide to sell you a half-finished product because they don't think it sells enough. But I told them it probably doesn't sell because no one wants to do extra work when they're paying premium for a shock. And so I sent them back. So that whole situation was just infuriating. So if you're looking for an easy bolt-in solution for your rear shocks, Coneys probably aren't it. Unless maybe you have the factory purchase still. But on my red ones, they were welded on, and I sure as hell was not going to ruin those shocks to try to make the conies work. No way in hell. So, rant over for that. I did not film that experience, but I thought I would at least tell the Supra community about those rear shocks if any of you had any interest in going that route. So basically, over the next few months, many months, I'm going to be trying to get this car ready for a 5,000 mile road trip. I do have a lot of things planned for it. A lot of money is going to be spent, thanks to my friends. So if you are going to Supras in Vegas, maybe I will see you there if the car makes it. It would be nice meeting some of you. A lot of you I've only talked to on Instagram and Facebook, so it will be cool to see some of you guys in person. Look forward to some videos on this car. Thousands will be spent. And of course, I will be taking spares and spares and spares of electronics and all kinds of things because, you know, with this thing, anything can fail. I really need a trailer with just like a second car behind me, a whole parts car. So if you have any recommendations for things that maybe I should check or replace, let me know in the comments below. I don't think I'm going to take the engine apart. I'm not going to do the 1.5J swap. That's going to be put on hold until next year. I'm not going to do head studs or head gasket. I'm going to try to leave the engine alone and just look at stuff that's old, like original 30-year-old brake lines and fuel lines and electronics and things like that. So if you have any recommendations, I will gladly take them, put them in the comments down below. And yeah, look forward to more videos on this car. I know it's been a while since you've seen it on the channel. And maybe I'll see you at Supras in Vegas. So hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you next time.